got my second load of manure, and I got that finally all loaded into the hoop house and all contained within the hay bales. So now what I need to do is put another cover over it. So this works pretty well in the hoop house, but I don't want to heat all this space. I just want the heat from the decomposing manure to heat the space immediately around the plant so that I don't have to heat the entire hoop house with it. It's not as efficient if I do that. Now I've actually done this natural heat map process outside in a hay bale tunnel like this with a low tunnel over it with no hoop house, and it will work. It's warm enough even on a very frigid night to protect your plants. But since I have the hoop house from when I was a commercial farmer, I don't plan to get rid of it. It's very valuable. What this is going to do is act as another layer of insulation. You actually see commercial farmers sometimes put double layers of plastic on their hoop houses, and then they'll use a fan to blow air into between the two layers, and that will inflate. So you basically have an insulation layer. So this is basically the same process, except I'm not going to use any electricity, because I'll have a layer of plastic here, and then there'll be the airspace in the rest of the hoop house, and then this outside layer of plastic. So that gives me a little bit extra protection. Well, these are 1/2-inch EMT conduit, which I bent with a special bender that I got from Johnny's Seeds. Actually, I think I got my original from Lost Creek Benders, which is where Johnny's gets them, as far as I know. For these low tunnels, what I used to do is actually just jam the EMT down into the bales of hay and just use that as a foundation. That works pretty well. It'll get through the season, but what happens is, with all the water and moisture and hot and cold and all the flexing inside the hoop house, the hay bales get stretched out, and there's a lot of weight on top of this once you put the plastic on. So what will happen is that they'll eventually work their way through the hay bale and come out the other side, which is a problem for two reasons. One, it'll lower the plastic down, and by the time that happens, usually I've got tomato plants that are 2 feet tall, and they'll be touching the plastic, which is not great. The other thing is that when it jams out through, especially where I built it up to the edge of the greenhouse, I can actually poke out through the plastic, and this stuff's very expensive, so I don't want to do that. So what I've since decided to do is actually anchor the hoops to this wood. I just have some spare 2x lumber that I have laying around. So what I'm going to do is anchor it using these conduit straps. I just save these. You can see the screw's still in this one. I just save these every year, and these are size specific. These are specifically built for 1/2-inch EMT, which is what I have for my low tunnels. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually lay out where the hoops are going to go, so I know where to attach them to the lumber. You want to kind of space them out as much as possible so that they're evenly spaced, so you don't have any sags in the plastic, because again, at some point I'll have fairly large plants up underneath the plastic, and I don't really want them to touch the plastic as much as possible. This is going to be very temporary, so again, I said I reuse my straps. I try to just use scrap lumber, so this is only going to be temporary because all of this manure is going to have to be turned before the end of the germination season, which is around the middle of May. So I'm just going to put this together quickly. It doesn't have to be fancy, it doesn't have to look nice. It just has to cover the plants with a sheet of plastic, which I have out in the shed. This is what it looks like when you're all finished securing it. All this is a frame to hold up a piece of plastic, so it doesn't, again, have to be pretty. It just has to be functional. So in the back, it's anchored to the lumber that I just had lying around. And on the front, it's either sitting on the ground or floating just above the ground because it's resting on the hay. This will get adjusted several times. Just like the hay bales expand and loosen up, so does the conduit strap. So this can actually move quite a bit. It can certainly move back and forth this way, but as the season wears on and that strap loosens up, the screws loosen up in the wood because of all the moisture changes inside the hoop house, this will actually be able to change plane. So I may have to adjust it, but again, this is very temporary. All it does is serve the purpose of holding this plastic up. I just turned this in. There's a pretty good blizzard going on outside the hoop house right now. Nor'easter, we're supposed to get about 24 inches today of snow. Today, tonight, tomorrow. But it's nice and warm in here. Almost had to take my sweatshirt off while I was working. I certainly did while I was turning all this manure into the hoop house this morning before it started to snow. Tried to get that done. Luckily I did. But it hasn't heated up yet because I just turned it. So it's starting out right now at 50 on the compost thermometer, about 50. And it's about 20 degrees outside right now, so it's already certainly warmer than the air, and it's just going to heat up from there. So once it gets up to about 80 in the center of the pile, I'll be able to move the seed flats out here, and then I'll be able to germinate on top of here. I'll be able to keep the plants warm. But right now what I'm going to do is go get the plastic to cover this. So I got to go out to the shed and find a piece that will work. All of this plastic, or most of it anyway, I've been saving over the years. When I replace plastic on a hoop house, I take the old stuff and save it for as long as I can. I cut it up into lengths and widths that will go over the low tunnels. One of the things I've tried is actually to label these. It doesn't last very long, but I can usually get through a season of storage. So this one's labeled low tunnel 35 feet. Hopefully this is going to be wide enough to cover the low tunnel in the hoop house. It's labeled as 35 feet long, so let's go see how I did measuring when I put it away this winter. So I need to adjust this and move it this way. It's much better to do that before you put it on the hoops, because if you put it on the hoops and then try to pull it, all the hoops will move. So I'm just going to pull it on the ground very carefully so I don't rip it on any rocks. Then open it up and lay it over the top.